I have always been a person who is used to a life full of business meetings, manners, and dealing with complex financial issues. My day started by watching the financial news and finally analyzed possible portfolios. I felt like a fish in water in this world. My career as an investor brought me not only wealth, but also the freedom I valued most. My wife Katy has been the light that has illuminated my home. We have been together for 30 years, and in that time she has been not only a life partner to me, but a support in every way. Katy is a bright and showy woman who always knows how to catch the attention of others. A tall, long-legged blonde with lush forms and unquenchable energy. She was like that with tech porn when I first met her, and her energy has only increased over the years. We always tried to support each other. I made sure that she was able to enjoy all the delights of life that our state could provide. I was always happy to send her to spas where she could relax, or let her spend a day at the beauty parlor to maintain her natural beauty. Katy never worked, but her life was full of activities. Her energy always found an outlet at close gatherings with friends, evening organizations, and attending club events. Her social circle was huge, and she enjoyed the attention she attracted. I knew it was important to be the center of attention, and although it sometimes bored me, I accepted her for who she was. Over the years of our marriage, I noticed that Katy had become a bit addicted to alcohol. This began to bother me 10 years ago, but in the meantime I had come to terms with it. We all have our weaknesses, and I decided that love and support was more important. I knew it was her way of coping with the routine and being who she wanted to be. One evening when I got home after a long day of meetings and conversations, I found our house full of guests. Loud music and laughter came from the living room. I felt mildly annoyed. Lately I've come to appreciate peace and quiet more. When I walked in, I saw that Katy was the center of attention, as always. She was smiling brightly, holding a champagne glass and singing loudly at karaoke. Her eyes were glowing with joy. She was in her verses. I stood in the doorway watching her and couldn't help but smile. She was happy, and that was the most important thing. I made my way into the living room, saying hello to the guests, most of whom I knew. Katy finally noticed me and walked over, hugging her friends. I could smell champagne and her favorite perfume. "Jack!" she exclaimed. "How nice to have you home already. Come join us, it's great company." People were dancing, laughing, and enjoying the evening. I felt it was a bit out of my league, but decided to support my wife. After all, it was your life and I didn't want to stop her from enjoying it. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the thought that all this fun was hiding something deeper. Maybe it was Katy's attempt to run away from something, or just craving the attention she didn't always get from me because of my absence. I tried to let these thoughts out and just enjoy the evening, but they didn't give me any anticipation. My mind was tossing between being happy for her and realizing that her addiction to alcohol and attention could be a problem. But I also knew that our bond was strong enough to endure. Deep down, I believed that we could find a balance between her world and mine. The party went on, and I was happy to see Katy happy. This evening was one of many in our journey together, but it reflected on how important it is to compromise and support each other in any circumstance. I stood in the living room, watching the evening go on. There was a festive atmosphere all around, but I felt like an outsider. The guests that Katy had invited seemed completely indifferent to me. They broke into a small group, drinking and partying without paying much attention to her. It was as if they had come just to drink, not to socialize with the lady of the house. This picture gave me no peace of mind. I knew how important attention was to Katy, and her efforts at the party seemed to have passed the organization by. Sitting in my chair, I continued to watch the scene, trying to figure out what exactly was bothering me. Suddenly my phone rang and I excused myself to my office to take the call. It was one of my business partners, and he urgently needed to discuss a project design. I tried to concentrate on the conversation, but my thoughts were preoccupied with what had happened in the living room. I had finished talking and was walking back when I heard Katy's voice from behind the ajar door. She was talking to one of her friends, and I had unwittingly witnessed their conversation. First I heard her laughter and then words that made me freeze in place. "I'm crazy about him," she said. "He's great in bed. I've never met anything like him." Each word was like a blow. I felt a cold numbness conform to my body. There was only one thought going through my mind: it wasn't about me. I couldn't think of anything, only emptiness and incomprehension was in my head. My heart was beating in my chest like crazy, and I realized that I couldn't stay there a minute longer. I quickly made my way back to my office, trying not to draw attention to myself. Grabbing my phone, I booked a private flight to another city. I needed time to think things over and calm down. I left a note for Katy, briefly informing her that I was leaving on business, and left the house. It was quiet outside, and I felt the fresh night air refresh my thoughts a little. I realized that running away doesn't solve the problem, but I needed time and space to sort through my feelings and realize what to do next. As I sat down on the plane, I settled by the window and looked out at the lights of the city left behind. I thought about my life with Katy, about the time we'd spent together, about how my love for her had always been constant. But now it seemed to me that all of that was in jeopardy. I didn't know how to begin again. There were too many questions and no answers at all. This flight was a journey for me, not only to another city, but deep into my natural thoughts and emotions. I had to figure out how to move on with my life and how to keep the family that had seemed unshakable for so many years. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes, causing the airplane to lull me to sleep. This was just the beginning, but I was willing to face any hardship to keep what I held dear. As we landed, I felt a small sense of relief. Away from everything that had just happened, I hoped to find peace and a chance to sort myself out. The city I flew to was foreign to me, but that gave it a certain charm. I wanted to get away from the usual hustle and bustle and adapt to the atmosphere of newness and the unknown. I got a nice hotel room, but instead of staying in the room, I decided to take a walk around the city. I knocked out my phone, noticing that sooner or later Katy would notice my absence and start calling, but I just didn't know what words to choose to explain my feelings and my recent decision to leave. I needed time to collect my thoughts and process everything that had happened. The city was lively, with many cozy cafes and stores. I wandered the streets aimlessly, trying to distract myself from the oppressive thoughts. In the evening, the street lamps lit up with soft light, flashed passers-by, and created a cozy atmosphere. Back at the hotel, I decided to have dinner at the restaurant on the first floor. My feeling was low and empty, so I decided to order myself a whiskey, hoping it would help me relax a little. My head was still buzzing with non-attack questions, but I knew I had to move forward. My gaze happened to stop on a girl sitting at a neighboring table. She was about 35 years old and her appearance was potpourri. There were noticeable scratches on her face and her lip was smashed. The sight was unexpected and jarring. Someone had apparently hurt her, and the thought awakened pity and vindication in me. I wanted to support her in some way and decided to treat her to dessert. The waitress approached me and listened to my request and dealt with understanding. I chose a light chocolate cake, hoping that this gesture would help lift the girl's mood. When the dessert was delivered, the girl looked up in surprise and looked at me. I met her gaze and just turned around, smiling. She smiled back slightly and I felt a warmth spill into my chest. Even though this evening hadn't been the best for her, how I wished it had ended a little brighter. A few minutes later, the girl moved to my table, thanking me for dessert. Her voice was quiet, but you could hear the attentiveness in it. We struck up a conversation and I learned that her name was Emily. She was in this city on business and, as it turned out, had had an unpleasant incident with a coworker that was the cause of her appearance. Emily said that she didn't expect such aggression and was still trying to come to her senses after what happened. I listened to her, feeling my small load of problems recede into the background. I realized that there are moments in everyone's life that are behind society rethinking their values and outlook on life. This evening, what started out as a complete void suddenly took on a new meaning. Talking with Emily helped me to entertain myself and realize that sometimes meeting a stranger can be exactly what is needed in a work moment. I felt like this encounter gave me something more than I could have expected, and I was grateful for the opportunity. As we talked, I thought about Katy and our relationship. Perhaps this situation would help me look at our marriage and find a way to maintain the trust and love that was our connection. But now, that evening, I was glad to just be here and now, with someone who, like me, was looking for understanding and support. Sitting at the table with Emily, I could feel our conversations blurring the boundary between us. She turned out to be an amazing conversationalist, and I enjoyed watching her gesticulations, her high-energy activities. I couldn't help but notice how her eyes lit up when she showed attention to her hobbies and projects. As a result, I began to realize that there was more to Emily than just sympathy. This was unusual and rare, especially after so many years of being married to Katy. I noticed that Emily cared for me too, and that gave me confidence. We talked about all sorts of things: life, work, future plans. When I told her that I had to go back to my hometown soon to take care of the basics and that I would love to meet her again, Emily suddenly laughed. She explained that she, too, had come to this city for just a few days on business and planned to leave soon. Her story about herself was fascinating. She is single and building her own business, playing sports and volunteering. I listened to her with my mouth open, amazed at her energy and determination. Emily turned out to be a much more versatile person than I could have expected. She wasn't afraid of smarts and knew how to enjoy life. While I struggled with recent issues, she seemed to have found a way to move forward without looking back at the past. But I realized that our meeting was coming to an end and I would need to return home to start the divorce case. It was a daunting task, but a necessary task, and I couldn't beat it. As dinner came to an end, I felt like I didn't want the evening to end. I had enjoyed being around Emily, and I wanted to keep that feeling going for as long as possible. However, I believe that everything in life has its time and place. Before saying goodbye, I thanked Emily for making the evening special. We exchanged contacts and I asked her to text me as soon as I got into town. Her parting smile was full of warmth, and I hoped we would have another chance to meet in the future. When I got back to my hotel room, I felt ready to go home. Meeting Emily had given me strength and confidence that even in difficult times one can find support and inspiration. I knew that there would be many challenges ahead of me, but now I had great hope that the future brings new opportunities and happiness. When I returned to my hometown, I felt that the familiar places seemed alien and distant. When I planned to touch the ground, a wave of sadness and longing came over me. Everything that was familiar and dear suddenly ceased to retain its former feelings. I realized that I had a difficult conversation with Katy ahead of me, and she probably wouldn't agree to a divorce without a fight. I needed support and was sure I would have to have patience and forbearance for the trials ahead. My first thought was to turn to my friend Smith for help. He worked as a lawyer and was great at family matters. Katy wasn't particularly fond of him, which played right into my hands. I was hoping Smith could help me through this difficult process. Realizing that I had a conversation with Katy waiting for me at home, I decided not to go there right away. Instead, I went straight to the office of the company where I worked. I needed a distraction and to look at business. On the doorstep of the office, Rose, my right hand in all things business, was already waiting for me. Her friendly face and supportive gaze gave me confidence. I could see in her eyes that she knew what had happened, but she didn't ask too many questions, for which I was grateful. "Jack," she said when I walked in. "If you need anything, just let me know." "Thanks, Rose," I replied, smiling. I just wanted to dive into work and have some fun with all of this. Once in the office, I felt like I was surrounded by people who cared about me. Colleagues and coworkers already knew about Katy's situation, and I saw a mixture of sympathy and support in their eyes. This was important to me at a time when everything seemed so unstable. Work helped me forget myself, albeit briefly. I got used to the routine and tried not to think about the challenges ahead. Calls, meetings, discussions, all of it kept me from thinking about the divorce and the upcoming conversations with Katy. At some point, I realized that work was not only a way to make a living, but also a time where I could feel needed and significant. I appreciated the support of my team and was grateful to have them by my side during this fundamental period. By late afternoon, I decided to meet with Smith after all. We arranged to meet at his office, and I went there with the hope that he would help me make sense of this confusing situation. Smith greeted me with warmth and understanding. He listened to my story and gave me the opportunity to do everything he could to make the divorce process go smoothly and with significant loss. "Jack, I know this is serious," he said. "But you'll get through it. We'll get through this together." His words were a great strength to me. I realized that despite all the difficulties, I had the support of family and friends. Now that I had a plan and a trustworthy person to help me realize it, I felt I could move forward. The day after my meeting with Smith, I returned to the office. Everything was running smoothly, and I got into a routine, trying to focus on business. Soon, however, I noticed that there was tension in the air, and the employees were whispering among themselves. While in my office, I heard colleagues behind the wall discussing the minimal situation that had occurred at my home. Their conversation was quiet, but I caught enough to realize it was about me and Katy. "Have you heard about Robert?" one of the girls said. "That's the man Katy was talking about." "Yes, I've heard they've been dating for a long time. Almost every month at a hotel near our office," another one added. Those words didn't surprise me, but they caused a deep ache in my soul. I had already suspected that Katy had someone on the side. Our closeness and feelings had faded years ago. However, I had always chalked it up to a long period of living together and thought that this sort of thing happens in any relationship. Nevertheless, this information confirmed my serious fears. In the back of my mind, I realized that all was not smooth sailing in our soul. In the meantime, I had come to terms with the conclusion that we simply lacked the spark we had at the beginning of the relationship. Still, finding out about Katy's regular encounters with another man was a fortune. This news prompted me to return home and finally talk to Katy. I realized that we can't put off this critical conversation any longer. It was clear that we both needed to look at the situation and decide how to move forward. I left the office with a heavy heart. Walking through the streets of my hometown, I pondered how to start the conversation with Katy and what words to use about the meeting. The whole construct seemed so confusing. As I approached the house, I felt a strange mixture of softening and relief. I was scared, but I knew it had to be done. I walked into the house and noticed Katy sitting in the living room, surrounded by silence and repose. "Katy, we need to talk," I said, trying to sound calm and confident. She raised her eyes and looked at me. I saw a mixture of wine and fatigue in her gaze. "Yes, I know," she answered quietly. We sat down next to each other, and I told her everything I'd learned. Katy didn't deny anything I'd learned or heard at the office. She admitted that she had been seeing Robert for a few months now. It wasn't just an infatuation, an attempt to make up for what she said was missing in our state. "I'm sorry, Jack," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt you. But we've gotten so far apart. I felt like you didn't even notice me anymore." Her words hurt, but I knew there was some truth to them. Our relationship had indeed cooled, and we were both to blame. However, instead of working through the problems, Katy was looking for solace on the side. Talking to Katy helped us both realize that our past was no longer recoverable. I suggested we start the divorce process and give my friend the opportunity to find happiness in another relationship. It was a hard decision to make, but I knew it was the only path to a new beginning. But Katy, after a long pause, offered to think about it and decide what to do about it. She wasn't sure she wanted a divorce to solve the problem. I didn't understand anything. I just thought that she had lied to me for so long and now she didn't want a divorce. But maybe she'll go to Robert's and enjoy bouncing on top of him. These thoughts and fantasies kept me going. I decided to stop this conversation and wanted to call Emily. After talking to Katy, I felt the weight I had been carrying on my shoulders begin to slowly fade away. Despite the bitterness of the confession and the painful revelations, I realized that this is the beginning of a new chapter in my life. However, alone in an empty house, I felt the need to hear the voice of the person who had recently brought light and hope into my life. I dialed Emily's number with slight trepidation, not knowing how she would react to my call. After a few beeps, her voice came through the phone warm and welcoming. "Jack, it's so good to hear from you," she said, and I felt a smile appear on my face. "Emily, I just wanted to see how you were doing." "I've been thinking about our meeting," I replied, trying to hide the worry in my voice. "That's good to hear. Why don't we repeat our evening at the same hotel as last time?" she suggested in a joking tone. Her suggestion made me feel something live inside. My heart beat faster, and I realized that I was looking forward to this meeting. We agreed to meet the next weekend, and I started counting the days until we did. Every time I thought of Emily, I felt warm and happy. Memories of our last evening brought back a feeling of lightness and happiness. I imagined us sitting in a cozy hotel restaurant again, talking and laughing. And afterward, I imagined slowly and gently undressing her, touching her skin, kissing her neck and giving her pleasure. My thoughts were full of desire and passion, and I was waiting for the moment when I could make them a reality. Finally, the day of our meeting arrived. I arrived at the hotel a little early and booked a cozy table in the restaurant. My excitement was growing by the minute, but it was a pleasant excitement, full of expectation and hope. When Emily walked into the restaurant, I felt my heart beat faster again. She looked incredible. Her smile and the sparkle in her eyes told me that she was happy to see me too. "Jack, I'm so glad you called," she said, walking over to me. "Me too, Emily. Ever since we broke up, I haven't stopped thinking about seeing you," I replied, hugging her gently. We spent the evening talking and laughing, enjoying each other's company. Time flew by, and I felt that I had finally found someone with whom I could be myself. After dinner, we walked up to her hotel room and stopped at the door. Our eyes met, and in that moment I realized that there was something special between us. I gently ran my hands over her shoulders, slowly removed her dress, and kissed her neck gently. Her skin was warm and soft, and I could feel her trembling at my touch. My mind was full of desire and passion, and I knew I wanted to do everything I could to give her pleasure. Emily responded to me with tenderness and passion, and I realized that a deep connection had been made between us. In that moment, I felt ready to leave everything behind and start a new chapter in my life full of hope and happiness. It was fantastic. Her body is so soft, warm, supple. I had wanted to do this for so long. I wanted to give a woman pleasure. Yes, I have a strange desire. I am insanely happy when a woman gets great pleasure from what I do. I like to hear her moans, her words. It was obvious that Emily was very happy. Of course, I spent about an hour between her legs, and it's an incredible feeling. I had really forgotten everything that had happened to me. I wanted to see this woman every minute, but I caught myself thinking that this had already happened to me when I first started dating Katy. In those moments, I didn't realize who I was kidding, myself or Katy. Or if I was just using Emily, it was all in such a heap. But just one look in Emily's words brought me to my senses. The next morning after my night with Emily, I woke up with a slight sense of crush and elation. It turned out that all the heaviness and bitterness that had accumulated over the past few weeks had given way to the new security of weeks. Shortly after breakfast, while I was still enjoying the tranquility of the morning, my phone rang. It was Smith, my attorney and, coincidentally, my friend. "Jack, I need to talk to you," he said into the receiver. His voice was serious, and it immediately alerted me. "What's wrong, Smith?" I asked, feeling the anxiety come over me again with the lightness of the night. "I've just been talking to Katy," he began. "She doesn't want a divorce. She insists that she won't see Robert again and wants to save her marriage." I felt my insides tighten. I had expected Katy to evolve, but her insistence and refusal to break the marriage was still unexpected. What? But how could she just break our deal like that? I was shocked. You see, Jack, Smith continued, Katy is worried about money. She knows that you're well off and that you have a lot of connections. She thinks that if she doesn't divide the property, she'll be able to maintain some level of comfort and security. I think her main fear is losing her financial stability. I was very confused. I realized that Katy was worried about her financial situation, but I thought her desire to save the marriage had more to do with her emotional limitations. Now, however, it was clear that money played a key role in securing her. Smith continued to talk, but my thoughts were already focused on how to carry over from the new renovation. I realized that if Katy is holding on to the marriage so tenaciously, I have a serious struggle ahead of me. I also realized that her desire to remain financially stable meant that she would push to achieve as much of our joint assets as possible. Jack, I'll do my best to protect your interests, Smith said. But we need to be prepared for a long and protracted battle. I'll start gathering all the necessary documents and prepare for the negotiation process. I thanked Smith for his support and told him I would be ready to be his winner. I felt like I couldn't afford to lose power, but I also didn't know how this would all affect my future plans. After talking to Smith, I realized that my life had become complicated and confusing again. Everything that was shiny, seeming, and certain has darkened again. I felt that it would now be necessary to balance my authority with rational decisions. I have decided that the next step must be to scrutinize our finances and search to protect my interests. Katy will not be able to use the money to relieve the pressure if I am fully aware of our financial situation. After learning that Katy stubbornly did not want a divorce and that the case was not going to be easy, I decided that I needed to find a way to maintain emotional stability and continue my advocacy efforts. In this situation, Emily proved to be not only a comfort to me, but also a reliable partner with whom I wanted to build a future. I suggested that Emily come with me to my hometown to support me in this place and help with maintenance. I also decided that I needed to be honest with her and tell her the whole truth about what was going on. When I explained to Emily that I was going through a difficult divorce process and that my wife was acting pretty strange right now, she was shocked. I told her about Katy trying to save our relationship for the sake of financial well-being and how difficult it would be to go through the process. Emily listened to me carefully, her eyes full of sympathy and understanding. I didn't realize it was so complicated, she said. But, Jack, I want to be with you during this time. We'll get through this together. Her words comforted me, and I felt our union grow stronger. Emily's eyes were full of sincerity and support, and I knew I could trust her during this difficult time. A couple days later, we arrived in our hometown. I checked Emily into a hotel so she could get some rest and get used to her new life while I went about my business. I had a case to take care of and a meeting with an attorney to go over the divorce process. I left Emily at the hotel and headed to the office. On the way, I decided to stop at a coffee shop for a cup of coffee and to calm down a bit before the important meeting. When I got to the window of the cafe, I saw Katy sitting behind the glass. Katy was accompanied by a man, and to my surprise, it was the same Robert the First had heard about earlier. I felt a sense of betrayal and resentment flare up inside me again. They sat at the table and talked. Their conversation seemed lively and casual. Katy laughed often and touched Robert, which confirmed their close relationship. I could not remain indifferent and started following them. My feelings ranged from anger to deep sadness. I didn't know what to do, but obviously, surveillance could give me useful information about what was really going on in Katy's life and her real intentions. I watched them for a while longer, trying not to draw attention. Robert and Katy connected with warm banter and jokes, and it was obvious that their bond was strong. I hated to see how she seemed to enjoy the company of another man, despite all our talk about saving the marriage. As Katy and Robert got up and headed towards the exit gate, I decided to return to the hotel to consult with Emily and continue planning my actions. This situation only reinforced my decision. I couldn't let Katy manipulate me and use money to solve problems. When Katy and Robert parted, I felt anger boiling in my chest. They hugged each other in a parting gesture and headed off in different directions, a sight that spurred my desire to get to the bottom of the situation once and for all. I couldn't stay away any longer. I had to meet Robert and find out what was going on. I rushed after him, his tall, statuesque figure standing out among the passers-by. Robert was well-groomed and obviously confident, which only added to my annoyance. I couldn't stand that he was the one who was now influencing my life and my wife's. I caught up with Robert at the corner of one of the streets, getting close enough for him to notice me. He stopped and looked at me with slight surprise and wariness. "Robert!" I almost shouted, unable to hide my rage. "We need to talk." Robert straightened up and turned to face me. His gaze was cold, but confident. "What do you want, Jack?" he asked, a little mockingly. "You know what's going on," I answered. "You're not just spending time with my wife, you're actively interfering in our marriage and even trying to use it against me." Robert didn't dodge the subject and put down his cigarette, looking at me with open contempt. "Do you want to know the truth?" he began. "Katy told me everything. You haven't been interested in her for a long time. She's depressed and feels betrayed. I'm just trying to help her as best I can." My fists clenched with anger. I tried to control myself. "Do you think you're playing some kind of game?" I continued. "All this time I've been loyal to her, and now I see that she and you are trying to give me a life in hell." Robert looked at me with slight contempt and continued. "You must realize, Jack, that Katy wants to maintain her position and comfort. And your financial stability is something she doesn't want to lose. It's not my fault, but I support her. I know you will fight for your possessions, but keep in mind that she will also use her resources to wrestle away as much as possible." Those words only fueled my anger. I knew that Katy was concerned about financial matters, but I didn't realize that Robert was her assistant in this matter. "So you want to take everything away from me, too?" I asked, trying to control my emotions. "Do you think you can get something out of this divorce just by supporting her?" Robert only grinned. "I'm just helping someone I care about and making money from it," he replied. "I know you're a wealthy man, but frankly, I don't care. I just want Katy to be happy, and she thinks this divorce is her chance for a better future." The conversation ended in high tones. Robert, without losing his self-assurance, walked away quickly, leaving me with a feeling of extreme injustice and anger. I felt things had gotten even more complicated, and this encounter only added fuel to the fire. Back at the hotel, I told Emily what had happened. I was full of emotion, and she, despite her own shock, tried to be supportive. "We'll get through this, Jack," she said, putting her arm around me. "It's hard, but I believe you can get through it. We'll get through this together." I realized that we had a long and difficult road ahead of us. Robert and Katy were only part of the problem, and I needed to focus on protecting my interests and getting through this tumultuous period. With Emily's support, I knew I could handle any challenges, but my resolve was only strengthened after meeting Robert. When I returned to the hotel after my meeting with Robert, the thoughts of my impending divorce and financial difficulties seemed heavy enough. But just as I rested and tried to relax, a call came from my assistant at the office. Her voice was hysterical, and from what she was yelling into the phone, I could barely make out the words. "Jack! Jack!" Her voice was shaking with excitement. "There's a problem at the office. The records check people are here. They're talking about unpaid taxes and some other inconsistencies in the paperwork." I was shocked. All this time I thought taxes and all finances were under control. Bills were paid on time, reports were filed. It was a complete mess and I couldn't figure out what had happened. My thoughts started spinning again in a cycle of sound and worry. "Calm down," I said, trying to remain calm. "I'll come to the office and sort it out." The tax and record check problems were the last straws. I was at the limit of my energy and nerves. Time seemed to be a vicious cycle of problems and stresses, and when I got back to the hotel, I wanted only one thing: to disconnect from it all and find solace. Emily noticed that I looked exhausted and upset. She approached me with a warm look and offered to help. She realized that I needed support and offered to give me a light back massage. This offer turned out to be a lifesaver for me. Emily turned on a dim light and poured fragrant oil on my back. I felt the gradual tension leave my body as her hands gently glided over my skin, kneading every muscle. It was not only physically relaxing, but emotionally relieving as well. "Just relax," she said softly. "Try not to think about anything but the fact that you are here and safe." I stared deeply, feeling my muscles begin to lose tension under her skillful hands. The light scent of the oil and Emily's warm touch made me forget my problems and focus on the present moment. Of course, I couldn't resist agreeing to just a massage from Emily. I couldn't help but thank her, such a sweet and gentle creature. I love kissing her so soft kissing lips, her neck. It blows my mind just looking at her. I feel that she is definitely mine, the woman of my dreams. She understands everything without words, she just feels me. And I just can't breathe in and admire her beauty. I have decided that I will marry this gentle and sweet Emily as soon as I finish the proceedings with Katy and Robert. Because this person, her beautiful body, her firm breasts, I want to see her always. Despite all the difficulties, I felt Emily's support and understanding. I was grateful for her presence and help during this difficult time. With her support and patience, I knew I would be strong enough with any challenges that were yet to come. My decision to remain significant and act wisely in this situation became even firmer. I was ready to fight for my rights, protect my interests, and make decisions that would help me deal with my current challenges. Emily, with her compassion and consideration, was exactly the support I needed. There was a lot of work ahead of me, but with her help, I was confident that I could face any challenges and find a way out of this crisis.